What if your Tanium actions and software deployments could automatically follow release rings that you had defined in advance? See it first on today's Tanium Tech Talk. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone, and Tanium recently announced many components in our Autonomous Endpoint Management Roadmap. That's AEM for short, Autonomous Endpoint Management. You know, you've already seen the automate and the ask videos, and we're continuing to deliver on that. And usually it takes a while to see those drop into the console, but we're already seeing some new eye-popping features right now in production. And this demo is about to become your favorite new action movie. It's popcorn time, people. And you've been asking for these features. Today, we get to see firsthand what we call adaptive actions and ring-based deployments. Well, what does that mean? I've got some experts here to show us, and you've met them before. So help me welcome back to the show, Kat and Steven.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Kat. I'm one of the product managers here at Tanium. I have the privilege of coming back to talk to you about adaptive actions. You probably recognize me from some of the RBAC videos. I will try to make this one not as RBAC focused, but it's a pleasure to be talking with you today.
Hi everyone, my name is Steven. You've also probably seen me in the Automate and Ask videos. I'm the product manager for our common experience portfolio, so leading many of our Automate and AI initiatives. Really excited to be here with Ashley and Kat to talk about adaptive actions and ring-based deployments.
Steven, you just keep coming back with these big hits, man. You have a really cool seat in the company right now, getting to deliver some of this stuff. So tell me the backstory about what we're going to look at today.
And what we often hear from our customers is a couple of themes of challenges, right? They're really trying to keep their IT estate up to date and secured, and the surface area that they have to cover is really continuously growing. And there's a constant tension between deploying with speed, making sure things are up to date and highly secure, as well as minimizing risk. And so I'll kind of categorize it in three primary themes. The first is really the lack of visibility and data to understand the effects of changes in their environment. We often like to call this a scream test, right? When customers are rolling out changes, they're waiting for someone to send them an angry Slack message or an email or file a ticket saying, hey, this has caused some type of effect on my endpoint. And so really with Tanium, we have that data for you, and this is something that we can address. And the other element here is when rolling out changes progressively to the entire environment, our customers are often doing this manually. So manually designating which endpoints are getting the updates earlier or in the next phase or in the final phase of the rollout. And again, we can build better automations for that. And then finally, being able to do a rollout of updates to all devices at the same time without being able to progressively deploy the change, something that our customers are sometimes doing, right? So that's an example. I was actually speaking to a customer recently where they say, we currently do an automated rollout of browser updates to all devices at the same time. So it could be a high risk type of change. And so all this is really leading us to kind of customers going up, risk going up, and compliance going down. And what adaptive actions is really going to help them do is address this by setting up automations for progressively rolling out updates and changes to endpoints through a very controlled, ring-based progressive rollout that accounts for and factors in the real-time data that the Tanium platform can gather and really increase the confidence as you're thinking about rolling out updates in their environment and proactively stopping updates as well if you're seeing unhealthy endpoint metrics. So really allowing our customers to make large scale changes really effectively, efficiently, and with confidence.
The scream test. We've all, but anybody that's spent any time in IT is very familiar with the scream test. In other words, we push some kind of a change, right? And then we wait for the help desk to blow up. So when nobody calls the help desk, we just believe it was good, even though we can't see it out there across the world on all those endpoints. So that's pretty remarkable that we could automate that, Stephen. And I know we talked about automate already. How do we do this?
Number of elements to adaptive actions here. I'll just call out a few here, but Cav will provide that deep dive. And the first one is the deployment plans. So what the deployment plans allow you to do is segment your environment into different rings, right? So you may want to put your low criticality endpoints in your first ring, and then your executive machines in your later rings. So again, really allowing you to set up your environment in a structured way to be able to do it in a repeated manner. So when you're doing these ring-based deployments, it's really set up for automation kind of on a repeated basis. The second element here is the progression criteria within deployment plans. And that's really the key element. So as we think about automations, being able to pull that real-time endpoint telemetry, being able to understand whether there were any degradations on your endpoint or whether or not the action was successful on your endpoints for a minimum number of counts, those all factor into how we make that automation decision and how you as the user can designate those deployment plans to roll out the actions in your environment. And of
So
course, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, when we were at Converge, this is starting to sound like confidence scoring that we talked about. Is that related here?
They're absolutely related, right? So what the deployment plan is basically setting out the structure and foundation for how you want to roll out the updates. And the confidence score just adds another dimension, another element to your progression criteria. So as we're thinking about extending it to deploy packages and eventually patching as well, being able to understand not only how that update has been sent out in your environment, the success rate there, but how other customers are seeing that as well, all comes into the data points and input for you to make that decision for that automation to run efficiently.
Now, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. I know that we're not releasing everything all at once. So, with these new capabilities, where can we expect to see these show up first and maybe later?
We're going to first release it for our platform package actions, right? So when you're actually taking in action deployments, going to that page and being able to select packages, whether those are out of the box Tanium packages or custom packages, you'll see the ability to enable ring-based deployment. So being able to do things like changing registry key values through the ring-based deployments allows you to kind of bring in all those different types of elements that I mentioned before with the progression criteria, the deployment plans, and efficiently roll that out to your environment.
Man, this just brings back memories in the trenches with customers as a TAM, building out these complicated targeting questions and things that we would have to do to try to target a subsample of the environment. And you're saying that we can build this automatically. So, Kat, I am really eager to see, what does this look like?
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Stephen. So let's start with those deployment plans. I want you to think about how you deploy changes to your environment today. You typically start with a small subset of endpoints, probably, and then you increase it over time. When you haven't had that scream test, you haven't gotten those help desk tickets, eventually getting out to all of your devices or all the devices that you want to receive the change. Most of the customers that we talk to try not to deploy changes to all endpoints at one time, but try to do it slowly over time. For our customers, we've heard of two common ways that they designate these endpoints. So when it comes to deployment plans, we have two types of deployment plans. We have what we call dynamic deployment plans, which are based off of a specific percentage of endpoints that can be targeted. So you can say, I want to target 1% of my endpoints in the first ring, or 10% of my endpoints, and then continue on to greater percentages. The other option that we have that we'll get into a little bit more detail in a moment is being able to target by individual filter groups. This allows you to choose which endpoints comprise each ring. So you have the option of being able to do it a random percentage or being able to be a little bit more controlled in which endpoints comprise each of those rings. From there, you can choose additional information about how these actions move on to the next ring. What has to be completed? What has to be evaluated to progress to the next ring? Do you have to have a minimum percentage of success, a specific time to wait, etc.? But the other side of it is you probably don't have one way that you do this today. There's probably different rings that you use or different speeds that you use depending on what you are deploying to your environment. So you can create multiple deployment plans depending on the speed of which you want to deploy that action or the endpoints that you want to comprise each of those rings. And you can choose which deployment plan you want to use when you create those actions.
So what I'm hearing you say there is, all right, so if I'm just doing an everyday thing, like it's common for us to go into Interact, grab a bunch of machines and push something to those machines, starting a service, changing a registry key, like we said earlier. So I might want some of those things that just, maybe it's low impact. We'll just get everybody in the normal way that we do. But then there's sometimes it could be disruptive, and maybe I want to follow this one of these deployment plans. So it sounds like I've got a lot of flexibility here.
Yes, we offer lots of flexibility. So in a normal deployment plan, perhaps you have 3 rings. You might wait 1 day in between each ring to see if there's any problems that surface before progressing to the next ring. But then what happens during a 0 day? You probably want to get that change out faster, but you still want the confidence that it will stop if any issues occur. So you can create a deployment plan that has shorter wait times. Maybe it's the same number of rings, but it rolls out faster with the confidence that it will stop if any issues surface in the environment. So you still have that confidence and control, but you can adjust that speed and frequency.
All right, so if we pause and look at what's on the screen right now, I've got a canary ring, and on the right side, oh, this says wait 6 hours. Okay, and I see the 6 hours in two places here on the screen. So I've got 9%, and then I want to wait 6 hours, make sure that was all good. And if I parse this out down there, it says 90% success rate. Okay. Does the success rate, is that just like 90% of online endpoints right now, or this 90% of all targeted?
That will be 90% of all the endpoints targeted in this ring. So at least 90% of the endpoints that take this action in this ring need to be successful in order to progress to that early adopters ring.
And then we've got 6 hours. So I've got it, both have to be true. 6 hours has to pass and 90% success. Is that right?
Yes. So after the action completes on the targeted endpoints, we will wait 6 hours and then evaluate the criteria to determine if 90% have been successful. If it has been, we will continue on to the next ring. If it has not been successful, if less than 90% were succeeding in this action, then we would stop the progression to the next ring. And in a little bit, we'll get into what that screen looks like and how you can view that information and what you can do next. But we will stop the progression to the next ring.
All right. So how do I use these then when I'm deploying an action?
So the first thing that you want to do is to be able to create that deployment plan. Thinking about how you target your endpoints today, the more common scenario that we have heard is specific endpoints being targeted in each ring. So when you come in to create your deployment plan, if you have a specific way that you do, say, workstation browser patching, and you want to create a plan for that process, then you can select which rings you want to comprise or which endpoints you want to comprise each ring. One of the examples that I've heard is you'll start with their IT machines. So you want to target the machines of your IT admins because they're going to be the ones that are using them on a day-to-day basis. They know to surface up any issues that come up, and they are right there next to you to surface them up to you. So you can target your IT machines, whether that's one filter group or multiple filter groups. And then you can choose what that progression criteria is for each ring. You have to select a wait time. There has to be some period of time, but you can select as few as a couple of minutes to as long as a couple of days. For your IT machines, maybe you only want to wait about 12 hours before you progress to the next ring. But then you want to evaluate what is success for this ring. So you can select your progression criteria. And for right now, we have 2 options of progression criteria, but we will be adding more in the future. Execution success rate is that 90% or specified percentage of success that ran on your endpoints. We also have the option to select a minimum number of endpoints. This is really helpful if you have an action that runs over a weekend or after hours, and you want to make sure that if success is defined at 90% of your endpoints, maybe you want to make sure that at least 25 devices take the action, because a 90% success rate on 25 devices is different than a 90% success rate on 5 devices. So you want to make sure that it at least hits 25 or more devices before it progresses on to the next ring.
And I'm thinking also of like global environments where we've got workstations all over the world and time zones all over the world, and it might take 12 hours for it to make its way around its loop around the planet.
Exactly. The other thing that you can do with each of these deployment plans is select your deferred endpoints. So these allow you to select filter groups for endpoints that will always take the action in the final ring. Even if they're part of one of the previous rings, they will always take it in the last ring. Seen this especially helpful for things like executive machines, critical business app servers, the devices that you might not want to target in an earlier ring because they are the greatest impact if something goes wrong. This also allows you to have that flexibility of using those dynamic plans and selecting specific percentage of devices instead of individual devices, but knowing that your most critical devices will take the action at the end.
And is there also a way to maybe exclude those?
To exclude endpoints entirely from a deployment plan, you would need to adjust your targeting of the action so that they're not included in the overall targeting of the action. The deferred endpoints will just make sure that the action is taken in the final ring after all previous rings have completed before surfacing up to those endpoints.
That makes sense. Also, on your creation page there, I noticed there was a content set selection. So does that mean that these ring deployments can be managed with RBAC? So certain groups of administrators can see them and others can't?
You're just trying to bring up RBAC, aren't you, Ashley?
I'm sorry.
Yes,
You know, it's our favorite topic.
it is. Yes, deployment plans can be in content sets, and you can restrict who can see or create those deployment plans based on the content set access.
I just have to pause there and say, wow. Okay, it's just great to see that level of control and granularity in a 1.0 release of a new capability like this. So props to the team. Thank you.
You know, we had to include the content sets. I love content sets. You can also select what type of action this plan is preferred for. So if you have access to the content set that this deployment plan is a part of, you can see the deployment plan wherever they can be used. But you can also choose your preferred action type and multiple. So if this plan is specifically for platform actions and you want it to surface up at the top of your platform action deployment page, you can select that when you create the deployment plan. So Ashley, you asked how we deploy these. Like with anything in Tanium, we ask a question, we start with a report, we start with even client status. And thank you to our question parser for fixing my typo because I can't type and talk at the same time. So if I ask a question in Tanium, the way that we deploy a platform action today, select the checkbox next to the endpoints I want to target, deploy my action, and then select the package that I want to deploy. In this case, I'll look at adding a custom tag. Now, at the bottom of your page, if you have access to deployment plans, you will be able to enable a ring deployment for any platform action. We automatically select one of the preferred plans. So when you're creating those deployment plans, if you select one to be preferred, we'll surface those up to the top, but you have options to select any other plans that are available. And then we'll show you the plan details at the bottom so you can make sure that you are selecting the one that you intended.
I
In this
love this. And
particular
at a
case,
glance, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm just looking at the right side of this so I can see like 12 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. It's really nice the way it just kind of rolls all that up. So at a glance, I see who's going to get this. Wow.
yes. And you can make sure that it aligns with the schedule that you intend.
So like
One,
above, I can still do all the stuff I'm used to, like distribute over and all that with an action, start at this time, whatever. I can still do that and my filter groups up there. But now I can apply on top of that these deployment plans. I mean, this is, I know people are going to flog me. I bet I say this all the time on this show. I work for this company and I'm always amazed at what we've built because I mean, this is everyday bread and butter Tanium for years is the interact action deployment. And we haven't seen a lot of innovation in this part of the experience for a long time. And now we're bringing something really cool here that is so flexible and powerful. Wow. Thank you.
yeah, it is amazing to see the progress that we are making. In this initial release, it is limited to one-time deployments that start immediately, not scheduled actions. But then you can still use the deployment plan to control when it gets out to your endpoints using those wait times. Once you've created your action, we have a new page to display all of the new ring-based deployments. Under Actions, the Ring Deployment Status page. This page is dedicated to surfacing up all of the ring-based actions across the platform and all products that implement and utilize them. So if you create a deployment using a deployment plan, it will surface up on this page as well. This page is to give you a holistic view of all of the ring-based actions in your environment. So you have a single page to go to and a single pane of glass for all of those actions.
So that's a big tip right there. So we were just so far talking about platform actions. What else can we use these deployment rings for?
Initially, it will be available for platform actions, with deployments following up as a quick release later. And then we're hoping to expand to additional modules in the future.
So I'll be able to do my standard everyday actions and interact, and then also deploy software packages can go out very soon to follow. Wow.
Yes. And all of those ring-based deployments will also appear on this page. You'll get details about all of them, including the status, who created it, when it started, and which ring it has already progressed to. But taking it a step further, we know that as you start to use these more and more in your environment, and looking at existing environments and how packages and deployments are utilized today, we know that this list can grow very long, especially if you're an admin and have access to all of the deployments. So we wanted to reduce the time that you spend investigating the status of each of these actions and surface up to the very forefront which ones need user input and need user review. So up at the top, if there are any that have reached a failed state, we will surface up this banner that allows you to easily filter on those actions that need additional attention. Clicking into one of those deployments brings you to the details page. Right at the top, you can see why this one failed and what step it failed on. So in this particular case, the progression criteria in Ring 2 was not met because we had set a minimum endpoints of 1,000 and only 25 had taken the action. Scrolling down, we can see that the first ring was very successful. 9 endpoints took the action. We had set a minimum threshold of 90%, and the result was 100%. So we progressed to the next ring. Once it got to Ring 2, it executed the action. And we saw that the success rate was still 100% across all 25 endpoints. But we had set a minimum threshold for endpoints at 1,000. Since only 25 took the action, we stopped the progression to the next ring. This deployment will not continue unless you come in, you review that, it had a 100% success rate. Even though it didn't get to 1,000 endpoints, maybe I consider this to be successful, and maybe I want to continue this action anyways. You can manually progress this action to the next ring by clicking on Start Next Ring. This way, you have complete control over what is going on in your environment with the flexibility to progress if you consider the criteria to be close enough.
This just reminds me of all the years in deploying actions out of Interact in Tanium. We've had a lot of customers and employees too, for that matter, have always wanted to see what were the results of this. Okay, we saw there were 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 endpoints that deployed it. How can we know who actually did and when? And it looks like this is really close to that.
Yes, and if you do progress to the next ring, we will document who made that change and indicate that this ring was manually progressed, that the criteria was not met. We still list that on this page, but that it was manually progressed and when it was. So you have that audit history on here as well.
Nice.
At the very bottom of this details page, you can see the endpoints that have taken this action and which ring they took this action in. One thing I will note is the endpoint details here at the bottom for platform actions are currently live data. And the graphs at the top do show counts for offline endpoints. So you might see that the counts in the graphs towards the top of the page may not directly exactly match the endpoint details at the bottom, as this is live data.
Yeah, and I just noticed the ring went from 2 to 3 because you told it manually to progress and it was stuck at 2 and then we got it to 3. So yeah, this is making sense. And there's the endpoints that actually successfully completed. This is great.
Yes. And then if you wanted to investigate one of the endpoints, perhaps if they failed the action, you can pivot right here to your single endpoint view to get the endpoint details. The other thing that you can do if an action is currently in progress, again, putting that control back into the operator, the user of Tanium. If it is currently running and you choose that you want to stop or pause progression to the next ring, you have that flexibility on this page to stop or pause. If you pause, you can resume the action from going to the next ring. Now, this will not stop the current ring that is in progress, but will stop it from progressing to the next ring.
This is great. I just watched that. I just noticed that little that donut chart just changed as the status. Oh, we're used to seeing downloading, running, completing in the traditional interact view, but now we even get a little cool donut chart that just makes it pretty as we watch it go. This is awesome. I love it because I'm just imagining, it's one of the funnest things in Tanium is that first time you deploy an action, you get to watch the little bars move and the numbers. And, oh wow, it's working right now across thousands of machines that fast. Wow, and you could just watch this little donut just kind of move around. I can't wait for customers to experience that. This is fun. I told you this is popcorn. This is your favorite new action movie. Yes, I love it. There it goes. It just changed again.
So the final aspect, but certainly not the least important, is going to be the adaptive action modal. So when it comes to 0 days, you might be familiar with our Guardian content, where we publish dashboards, sensors, packages that you can use to identify and mitigate the hardest to find and most crucial vulnerabilities out there. With these dashboards, oftentimes we provide packages right from the dashboard in order to take action on that particular vulnerability. And when it comes to those 0 days, speed is very important. Any delays or any mistargeting of actions can leave your environment vulnerable. So to make that easier, reduce any errors, and provide a more streamlined approach, we are implementing a modal pre-populated with the content to deploy, the endpoints to target, and the abilities to select your deployment plan. This way, you have an easier way to deploy those critical mitigations or remediations across a predefined set of endpoints in your environment with an easy one-click option. No more do you need to go in and configure all of the settings for an action. We have them pre-populated here. If you do want that granular control, you can always click on the edit to go to your normal deploy action page. But this will provide a more streamlined approach to taking action on your endpoints, especially from those Guardian dashboards.
All right, so if I'm following what you just said, we went into the deployment plans. We created a deployment plan. We went into interact and traditionally deploying an action. That deployment plan was available there. Now, if I go to the little lightning bolt icon in the top right corner for some alert from Guardian that says, hey, look, this is the latest vulnerability in your environment. You want to fix it? And if I say, yes, I want to fix it, right there, it's also got those same deployment plans available. Is that right?
Yes. From those dashboards inside reporting, you can surface up into our adaptive action modal with the package populated and the endpoint targeting already populated. Thank you so much for your time today, Ashley. I'll pass it back to Stephen to wrap up our closing.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. And hope everyone sees this and is super excited about the vision and where we're going with autonomous endpoint management. And you saw with the deployment plans, with the progression criteria, looking at success rate, looking at minimum number of endpoint counts. We're going to add more and more criteria and additional elements there to make that an even more robust deployment plan. So things like end user feedback. If you can imagine rolling out an update to an environment, to those IT admin machines or to a group of test machines, and actually being able to send out a survey and say, are my end users seeing any impact? Are they seeing a healthy endpoint state? And then factor that into your progression criteria, into your deployment plans. That's going to be very impactful, right? So as we think about just quantitative and qualitative metrics, that's something that we want to make sure that we're bringing in the human element as well as we're rolling out these different types of automations. So we're really excited about this platform level capability. And this is not just going to be our platform actions, but for deploy, for patch, for any type of endpoint changes that you can envision making in Tanium, making in your environment. We want to make sure that you can leverage these deployment plans. So we're really excited to bring this all together, making sure that, as Kat mentioned, you have that single pane of glass with that ring deployment status page. So you can do effective triage, do an effective investigation, and make sure that, again, you're lowering your risk, increasing your compliance, and doing that in an automated and safe way.
Well, Stephen, I know a lot of people are watching this right now thinking, how do I get this? How do I turn this on? And when's it available to me? Could you answer that for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So these capabilities are going to be first available to our cloud customers, and very imminently, it would be showing up in your environment. And so, as Kat walked through, you can go and create those deployment plans, create those kind of different types of actions with those deployment plans, and be able to go into that ring deployment status. So all of our customers with Tanium as a platform can be able to use those features for autonomous endpoint management.
And that's in the cloud only first?
We're going to first deploy it to our cloud customers, and eventually it's going to come to our on-prem customers in one of the next semi-annual releases.
Okay. And then once this is turned on, it looks like, because I want to understand, is there anything I have to set up or configure? But it looks like I just have to go in and start creating deployment plans under that actions menu. Is that it?
That's simple as that. So there's no additional configurations or settings you need to tune. You just go right in, create your deployment plans. Because again, we're building on top of the base platform. So all the different components and features that you're already familiar with, we're just extending it and making it a lot more easy for you.
So I'm curious. Obviously, we test this with customers before we release it. What was some of the early feedback that you heard on this?
As I mentioned at the start of this, a lot of our customers are using that screen test or really changing and making updates to your environment in one big swoop. And they're really excited about being able to bring back that control, right? So oftentimes, our customers, they might have change freeze, change windows, especially during the holiday times, right? And being able to increase the level of confidence and increase additional automation. One of the things that I actually heard from them is they might bring that to leadership and say, instead of having these really long change freezes and windows, because ultimately, they're concerned about adverse effects of these updates, being able to leverage deployment plans and being able to leverage ring-based actions and progressive rollouts of actions to shorten that change freeze window. So to make sure that, again, they're increasing their compliance and making sure that their environment is in a healthy and safe state at all times.
Yeah, and I'm just guessing. I mean, you don't. I'm not guessing. I've seen this in the field. I mean, when you're doing all this manually, you have to visually confirm, okay, that action completed to just the first ring, and then I have to manually go trigger it to the second ring or schedule it. Maybe I have to deploy the action 5 times and manually pick a different target group. But this just handles all of that. I can see this already saving time, and like you said, making change windows more efficient.
And kind of thinking about the glorious future here, you think about optimizing those change windows, right? We have the ability to pull back that data from your environment. So, tying that to potentially things like guide and a lot of the autonomous endpoint management features, being able to generate or recommend certain windows in which you should make these changes based on what we've seen historically, based on what we're seeing in your kind of ring deployment status page. So there's a lot of capabilities that we're excited about here. So I'll give folks a little bit sneak peek, but we're really trying to lean into this vision here with AEM.
Well, Kat, Stephen, thank you both for this tour. This is amazing. And I know I've interrupted you multiple times. I'm sorry, but this is so cool as to see this coming together. And I tell you, after all these years that I've been at Tanium, to see this level of low-level platform innovation at this level is new. And as much as we've done in the modules, this is just going to make everything else so much easier now with this common ring deployment method and these adaptive actions with this dynamic criteria. This is just really delivering on a lot of those things that we saw on the main stage at Converge that we've been talking about even last year and this year. So folks, as usual, in the show notes below in the description here on YouTube, you'll see a link to docs pages. Because this is a fundamental update to the way you deploy actions today, you'll notice that the docs page that talks about that, several pages in that section there, I've linked below for you. They're now updated with that new deployment ring ability in there, right in the docs, as well as the KB for release notes. We've got a community article, a bunch of stuff there in the notes below for you to read up on beyond today's demo. So thanks again for joining us on this next step in our journey in autonomous endpoint management. And until next time, go Tanium.